Good evening. My name is Liz Davey, and I'm the Director of the Office of Sustainability at Tulane University in New Orleans, and I'm moderating this webinar tonight. Thanks so much for joining us. This webinar, Climate Solutions for Louisiana, is part of an event that's happening across the country, which aims to share ideas within each state about how to solve the climate challenge. When our coordinating committee planned this webinar, we were guided by the three questions that are on the screen. How can the state of Louisiana address climate change and create job opportunities for our young people? Can we do business in a cleaner and greener way? And what can the state of Louisiana do to help keep our young people in our state? Tonight, we hope to give you some ideas for answers and also to give you some specific and really inspiring examples of work on climate solutions here in Louisiana. Before we turn to our presenters, we're going to start with a brief video welcome from the professor who organized the national event, Professor Eben Goodstein. So here's Professor Goodstein.
Welcome to Solve Climate by 2030. Today, universities in almost all 50 U.S. states, Puerto Rico, D.C., and several other countries are hosting state and region-wide webinars focused on ambitious and feasible things that we can all do in our cities, our towns, and states in the coming year to really move the needle on climate change. Here is the most important idea to take home today. What you do locally will change the future. Fact. The U.S. state of Georgia is a top 10 solar state. The neighboring Sunshine State of Florida has very little solar power due to outdated laws and regulations. When we launched Solve Climate a year ago, we could never have imagined that today, entire countries and much of the world's economy would be shut down, with hundreds of thousands of people ill, thousands having passed away, and our health systems overwhelmed. I take that back. We could easily have imagined this. Our health experts and scientists warned us this was coming. After SARS and MERS, they told us this was coming, and yet we didn't take preventive action, we didn't prepare. COVID-19 has shown how fragile our health and economic systems are to extreme events. Our scientists have told us clearly that unchecked, climate change will turn our lives into an unending series of extreme events. Floods, droughts, rising sea levels, pests and disease, more extreme storms and hurricanes, all of this leaving hundreds of millions of people homeless and on the move. We can change this. We still have time to change that future. Last year, the world's top climate scientists told us that we have until 2030, 10 years now, to cut global warming pollution aggressively in order to stabilize the climate at the low end. That warning was the genesis for this national and international discussion today on how to solve climate by 2030. Solving climate in 10 years, that sounds challenging. And yet fixing the energy half of climate change by 2030 is looking more, not less likely than it was 4 years ago. The cost of solar and wind power, batteries, and electric vehicles have plummeted. In many cases, they are less expensive now than the fossil fuel power that causes global warming, and they are getting cheaper every day. Already, utility-scale wind and solar, big solar and wind farms that feed power into the grid, these technologies are crushing fossil fuels in much of the U.S. In Colorado, Idaho, and California, renewable bids are coming in at half the price that the cheapest fossil fuel plants can do. And this is where rooftop solar and battery systems are headed in the near future. On the vehicles front, all the major manufacturers see this coming. Mercedes-Benz announced last fall that they have designed their last gasoline-powered car. Going forward, every new model of theirs will be electric. Combining electric-powered vehicles with the impact of driverless technology, we could see a very rapid transition away from gasoline-based cars to EVs in the next decade. All this progress was the result of a major technology push by national governments. Starting in America in the 70s and then ramping up with the Danes, the British, the Japanese and Koreans, the Germans, and most recently the Chinese and Indians, government policies have brought these industries to scale. And now the market is taking over, and renewables, battery storage, and electric vehicles are on track to deliver power and transportation at prices unsubsidized that will lead to major disruptions of energy markets in the 2020s. can we get there fast enough to solve climate? Well, this is where you come in. With plummeting prices for renewables and electric-powered transports, the pace of the clean energy revolution will no longer be determined by Washington, D.C. and other national governments. Instead, the core action is going to be in your city, at your electric utility, and in your state capital. The key to solving climate by 2030 will be clearing the path at the local level to rapid deployment of solar, wind, battery storage, and electric vehicles. We need to get rid of outmoded laws and regulations that are holding back the transition. Florida needs to take the lesson from Georgia. It's imperative that we have justice in this transition. We have to make sure that the millions of green jobs that are created are jobs for all, and that everyone has access to clean, affordable power and mobility. Today, in Nebraska and New Jersey, in Idaho and Alabama, in Bangladesh and Brazil, we're going to find out what are 3 ambitious but feasible things that we can do right at home to smooth the path for clean energy and to bring energy justice to our communities. Following the webinar, I hope you will join a group or class discussion about what you can do to make these solutions real. Then, what next? Well, this summer, young people in particular have a terrific opportunity to both support climate solutions and gain valuable job skills in a down economy. The most powerful thing you can do to solve climate by 2030 is to join the political campaign of a candidate who best represents your views on climate solutions. In doing that, you'll also learn how to communicate, you'll gain courage, and most importantly, be part of a creative, strong, powerful vision for the future. COVID-19 is giving us a stark lesson about what happens when we ignore warnings from science. Today, we'll see how 10 years can be enough time to drive the climate solutions that we need, and that the future will be what we make it. Thank you for the work you will do to solve climate.
So we have a wonderful panel joining us tonight here in Louisiana. You're going to hear about green jobs, geothermal and solar energy, careers in coastal restoration and water management, climate justice, the HBCU Climate Change Consortium, and net zero carbon buildings. Each of our panelists will speak for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll have a question and answer session at the end, starting around 6 o'clock. To send in your question, use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen and type in your question, and then we'll take all the questions together after each presenter speaks. We are recording this webinar, and the link will be available probably on the green.tulane.edu website, and we'll also try to make the slides available as well. All right, our first speaker is Alejandro Martinez, and he's the Sustainability Manager at Southeastern Louisiana University. Next slide. And he's going to speak to us tonight. Oh, go back one. He's going to speak to us tonight on green jobs. And Alejandro, I'm unmuting you, or you're unmuted. Welcome, Alejandro Martinez.
Well, thank you, Liz. Thank you for putting this event together. Hey, everybody, my name is Alejandro Martinez. You can notice I have a different accent. I'm original from Colombia. I have been in Louisiana for the last 6 years, and I have the incredible opportunity to work at Southeastern as the sustainability manager. The position like I have at the university as a manager is a new position, actually. We didn't have this position 2 years ago at the university, and it was just through bringing a lot of awareness and different projects, like we were able to create this position. And I stay busy. I have a couple projects going on right now. So I'm very involved with geothermal and solar panels. But in the past, I also worked with biomass gasification, working with heat and power, and our green technology. So it's a little bit of my background. I have an MBA, and I'm going to be speaking today about green jobs and a little bit about sustainability. And before I explain a little bit more about sustainability, sustainability is a big work. It's hard to give definition for sustainability because it can cover many things like landscape, agriculture, human rights, social equity, energy. So I'm going to be very focused in the energy conservation. So I don't know if you can go to the next slide, please. So to speak about sustainability, we have to speak about this beautiful planet like we live. And in this planet, we know we have certain amount of resources, and we have to think about the resources like we have and how many people live in the planet. So this in sustainability, we call the triple bottom line. So as you know, we have the planet, we have around like 7.5 billion people, and our question is like how we can give them the same opportunities like everybody, how we can use the planet in a way like we are not destroying the planet and the planet can thrive. So and the only way like we can do that is also with prosperity or economics. So you're always going to hear about the 3 P's: planet, people, and the prosperity, or the 3 E's is called environment, social equity, and economics. So every time when we speak about sustainability or green jobs, we have to keep this in mind, how we find a balance between the 3 P's, how this is benefiting the planet, how the people, and how the prosperity. So this is normally when we speak about sustainability, we are going to be talking about this topic. So, and the main goal with sustainability is to reduce poverty, reduce zero hungry, educate people, and increase the health. So that's our main job, and of course the planet is the main emphasis. So can you go to the next slide, please? So what is a green job? And again, this is green job is focusing the energy conservation. I'm not talking anything about agriculture or landscape, but when we speak about a green job, we are talking about something like we can, when we are helping the environment. So when we speak about like green jobs, one of them, of course, is energy, how we can use the energy to be more efficient, how we can use renewable sources. But when we speak about renewable sources, we have to also considering what is the best thing in our case for Louisiana. So in some place, like in our case, we don't have enough wind patterns, or we don't have enough water resources to do hydropower or wind power, but we do have a lot of solar, and we have a great ground for the geothermal. So when we think about green jobs, this is some jobs like we have in Louisiana. And of course, the main goal here is how we can reduce the energy like we have in our case. And the way like we reduce that energy is like we just need to be very efficient. And what we're trying to do is to do conservation of the natural resources, trying to use what we have over and over. And something like is very important in this is how we measure this. And the way like we measure this is with greenhouses and pollution reduction that we have. So, and the only way like we can change energy codes and standards and different things is what we're doing today, just with environmental compliance, how we, sorry for my arrows, not the prettiest one, but how we can create a new solutions, how we can come to the economy, how we can do the things who can change how we are doing business and how we are using the energy efficient. And of course, the only way I do this is through education, training, and public awareness. So for instance, at my job, as I mentioned before, my job didn't exist years ago. And the way like my job come to fruition, I was a GA for the physical plant, and something like I started to do was like I started to measure what the university was doing from energy, how the university was using the resources, what areas we were doing well and what areas we were not doing that very well. And I start to track that information, and I start to use those metrics to give information to the people in the administration, so the metrics, and I start to educate them about what we have and what we didn't have. And that's how we start to come with new ideas. So part of my job is to collect data, is to give this data to students and to the administration to see how we can come with new projects, new ideas. Part of my job is to come with projects, how we can reduce the energy in one building, how we can apply for grants, how we can increase retention in our students doing exercises like they have hands-on. So in Green Jobs, we involve all of that. We have the knowledge, but we also need to have the practice. And that's how my job come. And we are proud. We have one of the campus more sustainable at the state of Louisiana. And we're reducing the energy consumption. And something like we have at the university, we have two things like they're very unique. And one of them is geothermal energy. And the other thing like we have is solar panels. And today I wanna show you what we are doing at the university and how this can be possible in other places, because we need to test this. So I'm going to start with geothermal energy. Geothermal energy pretty much is coming two words here. Geo is from the word earth and thermal is temperature. So what we're going to do is absorb the energy from the earth. So I want you to look here in this house, like we have a little house here. And in this house, I'm going to start to absorb the heat from this house in the summer. And I have a pipe who come and bring that heat to the ground. And then I'm going to cool down that house. So let me back up here. Look to the right. Imagine like we are in the summer and we have all this heat here in this house. So what we do is like we put a pipe going to the ground. Imagine like this pipe goes all the way to the ground there. And then it comes back. So when it comes to the ground, it's going to dissipate heat to the ground. And when I dissipate that heat, the earth, this is kind of like a battery. And I'm just like putting all this heat here into the earth. So I do that all the time in the summer. And in the winter, what I'm going to do is going to be the opposite. All that energy, like I have been saving here, I'm going to absorb all this energy now. And I'm going to absorb that energy and I'm going to bring it back to my building in the house. So pretty much what we're doing is just moving the heat from one place to another. So at the university, we have been able to prove this technology. It's an incredible technology. And I highly believe like we should do this in the States, in new places. Every new commercial building should have this energy. Because it can reduce the amount of energy and it can save a lot of energy. So just keep that in mind. This is just like a pipe going down to the ground where we are dissipating energy. So if you go to the next slide, I want to show you, this is, or oops, sorry about this drawing here. This is our two new hybrid geothermal dorms at the university, Ascension and 12 Oaks. It's the second largest system in the United States and the first of this kind in Louisiana. These dorms, they have 220 wells. So underneath the ground, this is one well, this is another well here, another well here. So we have 220 wells and they go all the way into the ground. This deep here is 300 feet. Now in these two dorms like we have here, we have 556 rooms. So we have at least 556 students living here. But normally we have around like 800 students living in these dorms. So again, in these dorms, there is no AC unit in this building. And what we are doing is just using the energy as a heat source. So again, it's hard to see in these numbers, but this day was a winter day. It was 39 degrees outside. And if you will be able to see these two numbers here, we're trying to warm up the buildings at 65 degrees. So what we're doing this day, we were absorbing the heat from the ground, and then the heat was moving to the dorms, warming up the dorms, and then it comes down in a closed loop. And we do this over and over and over. So something like is very cool about these dorms is to compare to our traditional dorms. We have 8 traditional dorms at the university. They're very efficient dorms. They have good insulation, good AC units, good LED lights. And these dorms are actually 36% more energy efficient, meaning our electricity was 36% cheaper, and we save 52% more gas efficient. So what this means is like we reduce the green emissions gases and we reduce the air pollution. So if you remember, we start to speak about the planet, people, and profit. So just think about this in this moment, in this, what we're doing with the dorms. With the dorms, what we're doing right now for the planet, we're reducing the green emissions. We're reducing the green emissions. We're reducing the air pollution. We have students who are living there. It's a hand-on experience. They come, they tour the dorms. They have able to stay there so they can get their education. And we're saving money. So these two dorms, they have been designed to last for 20 years. And last year, this is amazing. Last year, we saved $120,000 compared to our traditional dorms. So if you bring those 20 years to today, we're going to be saving $2 million with these dorms. So we're saving money for the university. We have happy students there getting their education, and we are helping the planet. So this is very exciting. If you want to really learn more information, or if you're interested to know who can make this, the company Metro is the company who installed this for us. You can check with them. But something like, maybe somebody asked, but how we can have this in a house, or is this possible for a subdivision? So I really want to invite you to check this Whisper Valley. Whisper Valley, man, I love these people. They're a subdivision. They have a subdivision in Austin, Texas. And in Austin, Texas, they have 232 houses, or geothermal houses. So the picture in the last slide, like you saw that house with the geothermal and the solar panels, that's a house in Whisper Valley. So they're building the whole subdivision doing geothermal and solar panels. So it's possible. We should incorporate this in any new commercial building, new subdivisions. We can start to do this. And what we're doing is just reducing the energy consumption. We're not generating energy. We only reduce energy consumption. So I know this is very technical, but it is possible to do this. We prove it here at the university. There is plans to do 2 more buildings at the university doing geothermal energy, and we are doing different projects. So I'm going to be happy to answer more questions about geothermal later today, if you have any questions. And connected with geothermal, so think about the green jobs in this before I move to the next one. You have plumbers, you have electricians, you have engineers who have to design this system. You have people who have to drill, people who have to measure the soil, make sure like the soil is going to be good. We have heat pumps, so we have electricians, we have people in the maintenance. So these 2 dorms that we build, it creates tons of jobs, because now we have different things. And people like me, who is doing the education from the buildings, bringing the community and changing paradigms. That is so important in this topic. So green jobs is all of this, is changing the paradigms and how we improve the lives. So you're welcome to come and visit our dorms at any time. And the next thing like I want to speak is about solar panels. So if we can move to the next slide. At the university, I don't know why I have that little right there still, but at the university, we have 2 kind of like solar panels, and many people is maybe familiar with these photovoltaic panels, and it's using the sun to generate electricity. You maybe see a lot of them in different places, but at the university, we have 4 systems of this. This is one, we have solar panels who can, again, this is to generate electricity. We have solar panels who can track the sun. So these 2 panels here in this area, they're at the physical plant, and they move with the sun. They move with the sun, and they track the sun all the time, and they're generating electricity. There is 9 panels in each of these, and there is 2 2-inch poles. So this is the most efficient way to track the sun to generate electricity. And over here in the right side, you have another system. This is 18 panels. It's the same kind of panel that we have here. And the reason like we have the same is like we want to compare them. I'm sorry for my errors, but we have been comparing them. We have been trying to see which system is more efficient, a stationary system or a system who is moving with the sun. And of course, the system who is moving with the sun is more efficient in many ways. And off the top of our sustainability center or green building, we have solar panels that they generate all the power for this system. And they're actually, this picture you're gonna see it, but in this way here, there is an electrical charging station that connects to electrical cars. So photovoltaic panels, they're getting more popular. The payback is a little higher than another system, but there is a possibility we can do this. California state, they request everybody for new constructions since 2020 to have a solar panel in their house to generate electricity. So I think like we also can start to move to these policies, like how we just choose a day, like 2025 or 2023. All new constructions can have solar panels to reduce the amount of energy. I mean, we live in Louisiana, we have too much sun, and there's too many ways we can be generating electricity. So this is technologies, photovoltaics again, is to generate electricity. But there is another kind of technology, I don't know if you can go to the next slide, and it's also solar panel, but in this case, it's called solar thermal energy. And solar thermal energy is using the sun to heat water. So this is completely different to the last one. The last one, we generate electricity. In these panels here, there is they look like a mirror. If you can see how it's reflecting the sun here. And when the sun reflects to the solar panels, what we have inside of the solar panels, if you look in this area here, there is a pipe who is just moving the heat to a place, and we can use that heat for different projects like we have. So we can use this heat to heat a building or a greenhouse. So at the university, we heat 2 greenhouses with this system, and we also use some of this heat to heat our biology building. We can use it for showers and sinks. So we have 2 dorms, Cardinal Newman's and Taylor Hall. Like they use solar thermal panels to heat the showers and the sinks for these dorms. So we're saving money there. And our biggest system is to heat a pool. So there is different ways like we can incorporate this. So this system can be more efficient like the photovoltaics, or it can be more efficient like the geothermal. Everything depends on the application. But for instance, I do believe like every place where there is a pool, Olympic pool or a big pool, we can be using this technology. If we go to the next slide, I want to show you our first project. I don't know if it's there. The last, can you go one back? Maybe it's not there. Yeah, I think we're missing one there. But there is, in our kinesiology building, we have an Olympic pool. And the way like we warm up this Olympic pool is using solar thermal technologies. If you think again, the 3 Ps, what we are doing, we are using solar panels to reduce the amount of heat like we have, the heat like we need to warm this pool. We have students who come to the pool, they can swim in the pool, they are happy, they're learning different things, and we're saving money from the university. So there is different things that we can do for this. So again, part of have a green job is, well, have metrics, show how we are saving money, how we are benefiting the planet, the people, and the prosperity. So I want to thank you, everybody. And if you're interested to learn more about us, you can go to Southeastern Sustainability, go to our social media. We're always posting pictures, information like we are doing. And we have a green building, like we can schedule a free tour where people can come there and have some experience there. So, so that's all I have for you, and I will be answering some questions later for you. So I'm turning to Liz, and thank you so much for being here, for being an advocacy for green jobs.
Thank you. Thank you. That was very inspiring. Who knew we had the 2nd largest geothermal system for a dorm in Louisiana? I'm sure we'll get a lot of questions about that at the end of the session. Thank you so much. We're going to move now to Lacy McManus. She is, okay, there we go. I'm just switching. Oh, good, great. She's the Vice President of Strategic Initiatives at Greater New Orleans, Inc. And she's going to speak to us today on careers in the coastal restoration and water management sector. So welcome, Lacy McManus.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for having me. Appreciate it. So yes, as Shelley said, I'm the VP of Strategic Initiatives at GNO Inc. For those of us who aren't familiar with GNO Inc., we're the economic development organization for the 10 parishes here in Southeast Louisiana. Just a brief overview of what economic development organizations do in the mission of GNO Inc. Essentially, we drive jobs and industry here in the region. So we look at areas that are high growth, wealth building opportunities, and we attract those industry sectors and we attract those companies to Greater New Orleans. We also look at the companies that are working here currently to build jobs, grow and export their expertise, bring GDP, increase GDP for the region. And we work with those companies to make sure they are happy, they're healthy, they're growing and thriving here in the region as well. Through that business development arm of activities, we focus then on what problems we need to be solving, what opportunities we need to be seizing upon. So you can see in this slide under the business environment section, we have a very strong focus on public policy. So what are the regulations, the rules, the incentives that we need to be pushing, or in some cases getting rid of, to create a healthier business community? We also focus very strongly on workforce. How do we make sure that we have the talent here in the region, both locally that we're growing through our higher ed institutions, and then also that we're attracting as well, to make sure our employers have that workforce and that labor pool that they need and that they're looking for. We also focus on brand. How do we make sure people are thinking of Greater New Orleans and not just thinking of the good times they have on Bourbon Street, but also associating us with a good place to do business. And then of course, access to capital as well. How can we make sure that the companies that are coming here, either from a growth potential or from an attraction perspective, how do we make sure that they have the capital that they need to grow and thrive, employ more people as well? So if you want to go to the next slide, I think somebody else is driving, is that right? Yeah, there we go. So we don't just focus on any industry or any types of jobs in our economic development efforts. As I said, we really hone our efforts on those industries and those companies that are going to produce high wage, high demand jobs. And so to do that, we step back and we look at what the industry clusters we should be focusing on are. So in Greater New Orleans, we have 3 foundational clusters that underpin our economy. They're the foundation. They're the reason why we are here and why people 300 years ago decided to build a city in a swamp. So oil and gas is one of those industry sectors. Advanced manufacturing is another, and transportation, trade, and logistics, which is essentially our port system, is the third. We also look at diversifying industries. So what are those industries that we need to be bringing in? What are those companies we need to be attracting to make sure we have a diverse economic portfolio and a number and range of different kind of job opportunities? So our diversifying sectors that we focus on are technology, both IT jobs, digital media jobs, those firms that are coming in to increase our tech portfolio. Also healthcare, so the healthcare system in the hospitals that are currently here, also building out destination healthcare. And then lastly, environmental management. So that's what I'm going to talk to you a little bit about today, why environmental management is a driving sector here in Southeast Louisiana and what we're doing to make sure we have a strong workforce to support that industry sector. You'll go to the next slide, please. So the water management sector here in Southeast Louisiana presents a massive opportunity for economic growth and for job pipelines here in the region. One of the problems, though, in trying to measure the growth of this sector and the types of jobs is that there's a lot of disagreement on how we actually measure jobs and what kind of parameters we actually put around the water sector or water industry. And I'll talk a little bit more about why that is over the course of this presentation. But it can be really challenging for us to define clearly what a water job is. It also can be really challenging for us to define what a tech job or the tech sector is. We have challenges in defining oftentimes what these industry clusters or sectors look like. However, what we know is that we have a lot of federal dollars coming into water management projects here in Greater New Orleans. That includes both coastal restoration jobs, which we'll talk a little bit more about through this presentation, but also urban water jobs. So jobs fixing and upgrading our sewage and water systems here in Orleans Parish and Jefferson Parish, jobs bringing online green infrastructure projects, et cetera. There's a lot of opportunity and a lot of dollars that are going into these big projects. So we know that we have a lot of action and we have a lot of momentum. We need to catalog it and try to identify where the pathways and opportunities for individuals to enter the workforce are. And that's where our work at GNO Inc. comes in. So when we step back and we look at the coastal piece of things, We know that we're going to be spending over $4.2 billion implementing coastal master plan projects here in Greater New Orleans, and that those are going to, over the coming years, and those are going to sustain over 3,000 jobs annually. So coastal restoration as one piece of our water portfolio and water profile is going to create a lot of jobs. We're going to have a lot of money spent. There's going to be significant investment just in this area. So we worked with the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority, which is the entity that is doing much of this work in the coastal landscape, back in 2019 to figure out how we can assess the jobs in this area and start to predict some of the job opportunities a little bit better so that our higher education partners like Tulane, like Southeastern, like Delgado, Nunez, and North Shore Technical Community College, and a host of others can start building out the right kinds of programs. And we can start having young people get involved in coastal restoration opportunities and career pathways in a meaningful way. If you go to the next slide, please. So what are some of the challenges that are really spurring this sector on? Well, flooding, as probably everyone knows if you're living here in New Orleans, or even if you watch the news. Coastal erosion, as I mentioned. You probably heard the expression that we are losing a football field of land every hour. That is, some folks will say that's too much and an overly ambitious estimation. Some folks will say that's overly conservative, depending on who you talk to. But we know that our coastal land loss is a massive challenge. Even in the best of circumstances, with the best predictions, with all of the money that we have right now going into the coast, all of the projects that we have planned, implemented, we hope to break even on our coastal land loss in 30 years. We have a big challenge ahead of us with coastal land loss. Subsidence is another part of that challenge. We are sinking literally into the Gulf of Mexico. It's a result of gravity. It's a result of some of our poor engineering and infrastructure practices. But subsidence is a major challenge for our infrastructure here in Orleans Parish, in the city, and then also along our coastline. I'm going to go to the next slide. So what are we doing about confronting these challenges? As I said a few slides ago, there's a lot of dollars coming in, fortunately, for our infrastructure right now. And those dollars are going to a number of different sources, both federal entities, state entities, municipalities. There are a number of public entities that are getting significant dollars to start to combat the challenges that I just reviewed, and even more. However, we know that these dollars fall typically into three distinct phases of project management. So the first is design. And these phases are really important when we talk about workforce, because I think it'll give some of you on the line who are listening an idea of some of the careers that you can go into and what you'd specifically be doing at each phase. So the first phase of any water management project, frankly any infrastructure project, is going to be design and engineering. You have to plan out the project, scope out the project. In the case of coastal restoration and water management projects, there's a lot of environmental assessment that has to go on. You need to analyze the soil and the capacity, the hydrology, the slope. There's a number of different indicators and metrics that have to be assessed before you can actually execute on a project, which is phase two, actually executing, building a project, that construction phase. We know that this is typically the most costly and also where you see the most jobs in any of these infrastructure and water management phases. And then there's the last phase of maintaining and monitoring a project. So because we have a very dynamic environment down here, we can't just build a project and walk away and say, oh, that'll be good to go for the next 100 years or even the next 5. We could have a hurricane come along. We could have increased sea level rise, greater rates of subsidence than we originally calculated. All of these projects have to be monitored and they have to be maintained for the safety of the residents that they're protecting and also for their efficiency in rebuilding land and rebuilding our coast. If you'll go to the next slide. So, how are we doing all of this work? How are we ensuring that these three phases that I just mentioned, both on the coastal front and the urban waterfront, are actually being rolled out in a sequential, meaningful way? Well, fortunately, we have plans and guiding documents that really not only present a vision for how we should be managing our water and these serious challenges that I just reviewed, but also how we should be prioritizing projects, what we should be doing when, what's the best bang for our buck in terms of protecting people, using scarce resources, restoring that which we've lost. The guiding document for the coastal part of things in South Louisiana, and this really applies for the entire Louisiana coastline, is the state's coastal master plan, which you see here on the screen on your left, Louisiana's comprehensive master plan for a sustainable coast. This is a 50-year, $50 billion master plan for coastal protection and restoration in South Louisiana. We also, in the Greater New Orleans region, have a vision for living with water called the Greater New Orleans Urban Water Plan. And GNO Inc., my organization, actually facilitated the creation of this plan a number of years ago. We released it in 2013. We're actually looking at doing an update on it right now. And it presents a vision for living with water inside the levee system. So in Orleans, Jefferson, and St. Bernard parishes. These plans have the different projects, the outlines, and the vision for what we need to be doing to confront our challenges and make sure that we can continue to live in South Louisiana for the next 200, 300, 500 years, even with the sea level rise we're seeing, even with the subsidence that we're seeing and the coastal land loss that we've already experienced. These plans are based on science, not politics, which is a very big deal in Louisiana. And so that we have these science-based, evidence-driven plans that get updated, in this case, the Coastal Master Plan, every 6 years, that's a big deal for us. It keeps us on the cutting edge of science and makes sure we're able to respond and invest our dollars in the appropriate and most aggressive ways. Next slide. So as I said already, there's 3 different phases of water management. And when we look at the workforce opportunities in water management, we looked at these phases to really figure out where the jobs are, what the jobs look like when it comes to our coastal restoration expenditures, because those right now are the biggest dollars going towards water management jobs. And also that's the steadiest stream of dollars and funding for coastal restoration, or excuse me, for water management right now is in the coastal realm. So if you'll go to the next phase, or next slide. So real quick on our competitive regional advantage. Ironically, because of the heavy oil and gas infrastructure that we have here in Southeast Louisiana, we have a really, literally an unprecedented and unparalleled expertise when it comes to heavy and civil engineering expertise here in the region. And what we're able to do with that expertise, because it's literally in many instances the same knowledge base, the same principles, the same expertise that you need for water management is in oil and gas, we're able to leverage that now to restore our coast and restore our infrastructure. There are a number of ironies that I'm sure many of you are thinking about right now in that situation, but it is in fact the case. We'll go to the next slide. So let's talk a little bit about the jobs in this first phase of planning, engineering, and design. Again, this is looking at the master plan projects and really coastal restoration area of water management, because those are the most secured funding streams for the next 13.5-ish years. So we can predict the job growth here a little bit better, but the jobs that are listed here, even though the numbers might vary a little bit when you talk about the urban water context, these are the same skill sets that you're going to need in urban water. And based on what Alejandro just presented, they're also the same skill sets that you're going to need if you're going to try to build and maintain a geothermal dorm or do some of these other green jobs that he was just reviewing as well. We need those environmental scientists and the specialists. We need the engineers, technicians, we need surveyors, geoscientists, and we need a lot of civil engineers in this early planning and engineering and design phase of these projects. We need those folks who are able to really look at a site and assess its viability moving forward and assess the best type of coastal project, whether that's protection or restoration project that should be implemented there. So these are typically what we call high-skill jobs, so jobs that typically require at least a 4-year bachelor's degree, sometimes a master's degree, sometimes even a PhD, depending on those jobs. There aren't as many jobs. The quantity of jobs in this phase isn't as great, but oftentimes the wages in this phase are much higher. And again, you need a higher level of education to work in this particular phase of work in coastal restoration. So if we go to the next slide, please. So construction. This is where you see the quantity of jobs. The projects that we're talking about from a coastal restoration perspective are massive infrastructure projects. In some cases, the projects that are in the Coastal Master Plan are unprecedented internationally. Nowhere in the world ever in time have we done some of the projects that we're talking about doing and planning to do right now in the Coastal Master Plan. They're going to require a lot of folks with construction expertise. A lot of times that construction expertise is going to fall in what we call the middle skill job range. So jobs that require more than a high school diploma, but typically less than a 4-year bachelor's degree. So a lot of construction laborers, a lot of what we call craft skill jobs. So if you're a pipe fitter, if you're a welder, if you're a draftsman, all of which are certifications that you can get at a 2-year community college or sometimes through just a training program. That's what's really going to be needed in this phase. But again, we're also going to need a lot of construction managers, and we're going to still need a lot of engineers. So there's still a lot of opportunity for those 4-year bachelor's degree and up jobs in this particular phase. So you want to go to the next slide. So operations and maintenance, as I said, we can't just build these things and then walk away. We have to continue to maintain them. So there aren't as many jobs moving forward in the long-term maintenance of many of these projects, but this is a critical component to consider as well. And typically what we need in the long-term phase of this project are the middle skill jobs. So those associate's degree jobs or jobs that require specialized certification in water management or wastewater treatment, things of that nature. But what we also see here are basic skill jobs. And I don't know, I'm assuming many of you listening are probably college students, so this might not apply to you personally, but from a macro perspective, this is a really great opportunity to get folks who might be either opportunity youth, so young people who have either dropped out of high school and are trying to find their way in their next path, or returning citizens, folks who are coming out of our incarceration periods in their life, to get them into these career pathways by using kind of the basic skill jobs that we need right here. So jobs that don't necessarily require a whole lot of training, but gets them some hands-on experience, some work experience, and then from there they can move into those credentialed positions and maybe into those 4-year high skill positions as well. This is a great opportunity to get folks in the door, get folks aware of the jobs that are available in green infrastructure and coastal restoration, and just get them working, get some work experience, and then move them up a career pathway where they can make more money, where they can have more certifications. So this is an exciting phase for us to look at when we think about equity and opportunity in the water management sector. Go to the next slide. So, path forward. What does this look like moving forward? It's great that we know this about these jobs, but what do we need to be doing? Public policy is incredibly, incredibly important when we talk about water management jobs, and perhaps now more so than ever. So all of these projects that I mentioned, they're publicly funded, which means that the funding streams that are associated with them need to be protected and fortified. They can't be siphoned off for other uses. And they also need to ensure to be maximized. So we need to make sure that there are opportunities for increased revenue coming from increased resources like offshore oil and gas leases, for instance. That's a big focus area of the state right now. Even in a downturn, we need to make sure that those dollars are still coming to Louisiana and to coastal projects when that industry ticks back up. Right now, some of you might be following federal policy around the stimulus packages in light of the coronavirus and COVID-19. There's talk right now on the Hill, and my organization is very involved in these conversations around what's called a phase 4 stimulus package that will focus on infrastructure. This could result in billions or trillions of dollars going to infrastructure projects. We need to make sure that coastal projects and urban water projects for the Sewage and Water Board, for green infrastructure, for all these projects that I just ran through are included in that large infrastructure bill, and that we get dollars for those. Because again, everything I just ran through, all of these jobs, all of these critical projects to protect our lives and livelihoods down here, they're all publicly funded. So we need to maximize every opportunity we can through public policy. A few other pieces that seem to be honestly a little less pressing right now, that are still on our radar and that we're still working very hard on. Local procurement, making sure that some of our local firms can get these can get contracts to work in coastal restoration and water management. Also workforce and research and development, making sure our 2-year schools and 4-year schools are connected to this landscape and building out the appropriate programs. We've worked very closely with Nunez Community College and Fletcher Community College to build out their coastal programs for these middle skill jobs that I talked about. Several years ago, we worked with UNO to develop a certificate in engineering and coastal sciences. That's post-baccalaureate that a number of our firms locally send their full-time working professionals through to get just an added specialization and certification in Louisiana's unique coastal condition, so that their folks have a little deeper understanding of that from an academic perspective. And we also need to be focusing on diversity and equity. Because this is a relatively new or coming online sector with a lot of these projects rolling out in the forthcoming years, we have a great opportunity to make sure that this industry sector is diverse, that we're including, as I mentioned earlier, those opportunity youth, those returning citizens. We did a little bit of analysis on what the current labor profile in water management looks like recently, and what we found was in middle skill jobs, so those jobs that don't require a college degree but require a little bit more than a high school diploma, there's pretty good racial parity across the board. Whether you're looking when you're looking at people of color and Caucasian folks, there's pretty good parity in those jobs. When you get to the high skill jobs, the jobs that require a college degree or more, that parity drops off massively. I believe it's around a 6-to-1 ratio or something along those lines of Caucasians to people of color. It's a very significant drop off. So we need to be working very intentionally with our HBCU partners, our partners at Xavier, at Dillard, at SUNO, to make sure they're connected to this landscape. So that's all I've got. I'm happy to answer questions at the end. I see we have a few pop up in the Q&A, so I'll review those now and I'll pass it off to our next presenter.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. I know we're running a little long, but I just feel the content of these presentations has been really interesting and good. So I hope you all will stay with us, and we may go a little bit into the Q&A. We will go a little bit into the Q&A sessions because we have 2 really good presentations coming up as well. So type your questions in, and let's have our next presenter, who is Mary Williams. She's the Assistant Director of Community and Student Engagement for the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice. And she's speaking today on climate justice and the HBCU Climate Change Consortium. And Mary, let me make sure I get you unmuted here.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yep, you're all ready to go.
Great. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Liz, for the opportunity to present on this webinar. So as Liz mentioned, my presentation will be on climate justice in the HBCU Climate Change Consortium. Before I get into my presentation, I just want to give you a little bit of background of who we are. The Deep South Center, we were developed in 1992 by our founding director, Dr. Beverly Wright, in collaboration with community environmental groups and universities within the Louisiana, Mississippi River Chemical Corridor, Cancer Alley, and the Gulf Coast region. And we address environmental justice issues affecting vulnerable communities. We provide opportunities for communities, scientific researchers, and decision makers to collaborate on projects that promote the rights of all people to be free from environmental harm, as it impacts health, jobs, houses, education, and the general quality of life. A major goal of the center continues to be the development of leaders and students in communities of color that are disproportionately harmed by pollution and vulnerable to climate change. All of our education, training, and research comes from an equity lens. For example, the students that we work with learn that in Louisiana, 24 of 26 plants, that's 92%, operate near majority African-American communities. And in the United States, 70% of power plants operate within 3 miles of communities of color. African-American communities and low-income communities living near chemical plants in Cancer Alley have long suffered compromised immune systems and higher rates of decisions. A new study shows that the COVID-19 outbreak is poised to hit these people especially hard. So these are some of the problems that can only be eradicated through research advocacy and policy changes. So my focus today will be on training the next generation of climate justice leaders as it relates to climate solutions, specifically here in Louisiana. So our HBCU Climate Change Consortium was founded by my executive director, Dr. Beverly Wright, and Dr. Robert Bullard, who is a distinguished professor at Texas Southern University. And the purpose is to raise awareness about the disproportionate impact of climate change on marginalized communities. The goal and objectives of the consortium is to develop and train HBCU students on issues related to environmental and climate justice policies and community resilience. We bridge the gap between theory and experience. What's so great about the work that we do is that we take them from outside of the lab and into the community. We have several communities that we partner with along the Gulf Coast region, from Texas all the way into the state of Florida. Our HBCU Climate Change Consortium student-centered activities include organizing student climate actions. They have attended the Conference of the Party conferences. This is an international conference that's held every year to discuss reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. And of course, we have our annual HBCU Climate Change Conference. The consortium has 32 partner HBCUs. In the state of Louisiana, our partners are Xavier University, Dillard University, Southern University, Baton Rouge, and Grambling State University. Although our target population are students from historically Black colleges and universities, where those students have faculty mentors at each of those schools, we have a long-standing partnership with the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, University of Maryland, and College Park, and also we work closely with Tulane University and other majority schools. Next slide. As you can see on our screen, these are the co-directors. To the left is Dr. Robert Bullard, who is considered the father of environmental justice, and Dr. Beverly Wright, who is the executive director of the Deep South Center. Next slide. So I want to talk about some of the student-centered activities with our consortium. Next slide. The DSCEJ has engaged students in many aspects of community engagement and research. Students receive hands-on experience by training, immersing themselves in advocacy training and research to find solutions to problems in vulnerable communities. So as you see on the screen, this is some advocacy work that the students have done with the People's Climate March that we participated in 2014 in New York City, and then again in 2017 in Washington, D.C. In 2017, there were over 250 students representing 15 historically Black colleges and universities from across the Southeast region that participated. Participating in the People's Climate March gave these students an opportunity to advocate for their communities and schools located in vulnerable regions where intense hurricanes, drought, flooding, and other climate-sensitive hazards are commonplace. Next slide. Our students made their presence known at COP21 in Paris, France in 2015. This was a historical moment for these students. We had 51 delegates that participated from 15 different historically Black colleges and universities. We had majority students, about 29 students, and then their faculty mentors who attended with them. So for those of you on the webinar who are not familiar with the Conference of the Party conference, leaders from over 190 countries at this particular event came together and negotiated core issues on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And so this is an international climate change conference that happens every year. And this one was historical because I'm sure if you've been keeping up with the news, you hear a lot about the Paris Agreement. And this is the conference where the Paris Agreement was signed. So several HBCU delegates participated in interviews. The student delegates participated in interviews and press briefings in the official climate negotiation space that's called the Blue Zone. Some of the side events that the students attended included interactive simulation of UN climate negotiations, how to implement the Paris Agreement among Citizens Youth Caucus. If you could go back to that, the other slide. And so if you look at the slide to the left, it shows a demonstration that the students participated in, and then below that is a student panel that they were on. It's climate justice experiences and leadership of African American youth. And to the right is a picture of some of us who were there in our delegation there by the Eiffel Tower. On Saturday, December 12th, the Paris Agreement was signed by 186 countries, and the rest is history. And so again, I say this is a historical moment that those students will never forget. Next slide. So the HBCU Climate Change Conference this year will be our 8th year. It started in, our first conference was in 2013. And the mission of the conference is to bridge the gap between theory and experience as it relates to science and research impacting the health and general quality of life for people of color communities and low-income communities. Each year, our students not only have an opportunity to present their research, but also interact with community members experiencing the injustice of toxic exposure and climate change. Conference panel presentations and posters address climate justice, adaptation, community resilience, public health, economic disparities, and other major topics in the wake of climate-related disasters. This is also a great networking opportunity for our students who have an opportunity to meet top environmental and climate experts in the field. And there's also employers from big green organizations. So this is really a great opportunity. We have student panels, as you can see in the picture on the right. We have student poster sessions, and all of this research is done by the students working with their faculty mentors. Next slide. One aspect of the conference is, even though the majority of the students are college students, on that Saturday, it's normally a 4-day conference, but on that Saturday, we have what we call our Generation Next workshop of local elementary, middle, and high school students. And the conference is held here in the city of New Orleans every year. And so pictured on the screen, you have a young lady, she's from Arthur Ashe Elementary School, and she gave a poster presentation at the conference, and her research was on sea level rise. We have also had students who have participated from local high schools, including Warren Easton, De La Salle High School, New Harmony High School, which that particular high school focuses on environmental jobs and environmental research. And St. Augustine High School is another school who has participated in our conference. Next slide. This is a picture of our HBCU climate change students, mentors, and community leaders at one of our conferences. And as you can see, it's also a diverse group of folks who come to the conference every year. Next slide. one of the things that is amazing about this particular project is that since we've been doing it, we had an opportunity to conduct a survey. Where are they now? So, of course, the goal of the conference is to really get these students engaged in environmental justice and climate justice and be advocates for their communities. And so this year, we actually conducted a survey, reached out to those students who have attended our conference in previous years. Where are they now and what are they doing? And what we found is that since 2013, at least 25% of the students who have participated in the conference have either pursued advanced degrees in some aspect of the environmental arena or currently working in the environmental field. And again, we partner with schools from across the Southeast region, but because we're talking about solutions, climate solutions here in Louisiana, I focused on some of the students from here in Louisiana. So Luke Williams, who's a graduate from Southern University A&M in Baton Rouge, received his Bachelor of Science degree in sociology. He is currently pursuing a law degree from Southern University Law School, and he currently works as a law clerk at Baton Rouge City Court. Shakira Hamilton is from Grambling State University, and she received a Bachelor of Science degree in 2017. She is currently pursuing a PhD in clinical psychology from the Chicago School of Professional Psychology. And finally, we have Joy Simeon, who is a 2015 graduate of Dillard University, and she received a Bachelor of Science degree in biology. She received a master's degree in urban planning and environmental policy from Texas Southern University, and now she is currently working on a PhD in urban and regional science from Texas A&M University. I'd like to quote some of the things that they have said about their experience participating in this conference. So Luke Williams quoted, "Prior to attending the HBCU Climate Change Conference, I was disconnected from the issue of climate change due to the fact that I could not conceptualize how I could be affected by climate change. By bringing my attention how marginalized communities are directly affected by climate change, the conference has motivated me to obtain a law degree. I will be able to effectuate change through legislation and litigation to ensure that my community is considered when environmental decisions are being made." Shakira from Grambling State University said, "The HBCU Climate Change Conference encouraged me to learn more about advocacy and to continue pursuing education of biological effects of climate change." And Joy Simeon quoted, "I think overall the conference helped to increase my understanding of environmental policy, which is where I decided to further my education in the field. I believe the exposure to both the science and the giants in the field helped me to solidify my research interests." And Joy, so to back up a little bit, the Deep South Center, we are a nonprofit. We launched out on our own 2 years ago, but we actually started out on the campus of Xavier University. And after Katrina, we were at Dillard University, and it's at Dillard University is where I met Joy Simeon. I presented to one of the chemistry classes there, and it was really an interesting conversation. She, after the presentation, talked about Cancer Alley, and she came up to me and said, "Wow, that really was enlightening. I'm from Geismar, Louisiana, which is in Cancer Alley," and that's what piqued her interest in this work. And since then, she has just move forward with her education, and she had an opportunity to publish her first publication. And it's the title of it is CAPS, Knowledge, Attitude, Preparedness, and Skills, a disaster training approach for high-risk communities. And it was published in the International Journal of Mass Emergencies and Disasters. And it focuses on helping vulnerable community prepare for disaster response and getting them engaged in the decision-making process as it relates to their communities responding to disaster. Next slide. So with that being said, our HBCU Climate Change Consortium has really, we feel, made an impact on changing the mindset of college students and high school students as well. And our next conference is coming up this fall, October 28th through November 1st, here in New Orleans at the Marriott Hotel. And right now there is a call for student abstracts, and that's for high school students as well as college students. The deadline is June 30th. One of the things that we do ask is that you have a faculty mentor for the college students or one of your teachers for the high school students. So you have to have a mentor to submit the abstract. And the deadline to submit that student abstract is June 30th. And you can go to our website, and the website is on the screen. You can go to events, and you'll see all of the information about the conference. And if you have any questions about the conference, my email address is on the screen as well. So in closing, the DSCEJ has been intentional about preparing the next generation of climate leaders through advocacy, education, and research as we empower and equip students with the tools needed for climate solutions in Louisiana. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. That was very inspiring as well. So we'll move to our last speaker. He just has 15 minutes, but I know he can do it. He's got some really wonderful information for you. This is Z Smith. He's the principal for the director of building. He's a principal and the director of building performance at EskewDumezRipple, which is an architecture and design planning firm here in New Orleans. And he's speaking on affordable, resilient, net zero carbon buildings right here, right now in Louisiana.
Hello. Thank you, Liz, for that. This first is an aerial photograph. You can see the workers installing the solar panels on the roof of a new affordable housing project that is just opened here in New Orleans. And I'll show a little bit more about this project later on. I just have a few slides to walk through to give people a taste. But the big news I think I want to share is that the building community, I guess if you would call it, architects, contractors, and so on, working together in Louisiana and really across the country, are taking on a really aggressive plan to make huge reductions in carbon emissions, really on the kind of 10-year timescale that this series going around the country, that's going on simultaneously around the country, is asking us to address. Next slide. So buildings and construction has a huge impact on carbon emissions worldwide. One thing that would be obvious to people is, if you have a house and you pay a power bill or pay a gas bill, obviously there's emissions that are going on either from your furnace or from the power plant that's remote. And those are, we know about. And so that's the emissions each year. About 28% of all the carbon emissions that are happening due to the buildings that already exist. And each year we might add 1 or 2 or 3% to that stock, depending on how fast buildings, construction is growing in a region or buildings are being cycled in. But the other thing that's happening is a realization that's really just come through, and we've been doing the math better in the last few years, is that the buildings that are under construction just this year alone are going to be responsible for, in the making of the concrete, the making of the steel, the fabrication of the wood, and so on, for 11% of all global carbon emissions. And so what we choose to make our buildings out of can have a huge impact on emissions each year. And then finally, where we build the buildings, it's fine to make net zero buildings, but if you make them in a place where people will have to drive to get there, there's going to be a lot of emissions from transportation. And so moving things towards walkable communities where people can, where driving is a choice, not a requirement, is going to be a huge and important part. Now, the American Institute of Architects, of which I'm a member, their membership voted, their 100,000 members nationwide voted last summer to commit architects to net zero design, transitioning from where we are today to net zero over the next 10 years. And we know that this is possible because we've already, for the last 7 years, had in place a tracking mechanism where we are able to do either deep energy retrofits of existing buildings or new construction for buildings that uses 70% less energy than typical buildings. So our goal is to make new buildings or renovated buildings either net zero or net zero ready. Of course, it also highlights that we need to, wherever we can, renovate rather than replace buildings because of the huge carbon emissions associated with new construction. We have to work smarter to not have any lazy steel or any lazy concrete in our buildings. And then we can choose lower carbon materials. The carbon footprint of wood is much less than steel somewhat less than concrete. And in fact, with some new materials that's under development, we can have a building that sequesters more carbon. It locks up carbon in the building structure itself. So all of these things, if you add them up, that's sort of about 60% of all the emissions. And these are all under control of people who are either designing or building new buildings. Next slide, please. To give an example of what a deep energy retrofit can do, this is a not very inspiring looking building from the outside up in Baton Rouge. That's a stack of 8, you could call them pancake floors. And this is on the right-hand side, this is what those buildings look like, what it is to work inside that building. Lighting quality, not so good. Air quality, not so good. Thermal comfort, people complaining of being uncomfortable, and no views to the outside. However, we're able to, through a deep intervention in this building, cut its energy use by 70%, next slide, and turn that into this, where everybody has a view, where people are encouraged to walk up and through this building through a series of open stairs. The head of the firm, it's her plan to each morning walk up the 7 floors to her office as she meets and working with all the employees. So deep energy retrofits can have a huge impact. And this was all motivated not by somebody who wanted to save energy, but they wanted to attract and retain employees. That's what drove this project. Next slide. Next slide. Thank you. Deep energy retrofits, oh, go back one, please. Thank you. Deep retrofits can happen at all scales. For example, this is my own home here in New Orleans, where this is a house built in 1880, and through a series of improvements, we were able to cut the energy use by 2/3, and then offset most of the rest of the energy use with some rooftop solar. But another thing that happened 10 years later was we decided, all of our neighbors were getting emergency generators because we get so many power outages here. And instead, we were able to get some Tesla power walls on this house as a way of experimenting with on-site storage. And so that's helped us get to net zero. Next slide, please. And so you can see how that works with a battery system where we're monitoring the solar production from the solar array, the storage into the batteries, and then drawing from the batteries when we need. So this house on this particular day kind of disappeared from the grid for many hours at a time. Next slide. And these same ideas then we were able to apply to this affordable housing project built by SBP, which is a nonprofit that helps people on resilience and helps people recover from climate disasters. This is affordable housing that uses it consumes 1/3 as much energy as a typical apartment building. But because those rooftop solar and on-site battery storage, this whole building is able to island, meaning it can detach itself from the grid for hours or days at a time, which is especially important because some of the apartments here are being rented to people who have severe health conditions and might have equipment that needs to keep running. What's really important is that this project was built for $164 a square foot. That number might not mean much, but the average house in New Orleans sells for $165 a square foot. So we're able to do new construction, net zero, affordability, resilient, for an affordable price. Next slide. So, one of the things that we need to take away is what we can all do now. If you are at a high school or you are at a college, I think Alejandro showed what one university is taking on by going through and looking at their bills and working hard to improve things. Buildings, I hope I've convinced you, have a huge impact. But policy can have a huge impact too. As an example, there was a law passed in 2001 that requires the state of Louisiana for every building that's received state money to get built to measure its energy use and identify the bad performers and then set in place a series of policies to improve that and drastically reduce the energy use of those buildings. This law has never actually been funded or implemented, so it's on the books, but there's no staff behind it. This is the kind of thing that at the stroke of a pen, a couple of staff people, there are millions and millions of square feet in state-funded buildings. This could have a huge impact if they were even measuring what the buildings were doing. There's similar actions are being discussed for the city of New Orleans, for any city around the state. These benchmarking ordinances where you measure how good a building is doing compared to other similar buildings could have huge impact by just identifying which are the ones that are worst performers. And so we can start tuning them, bringing their consumption down while our power grid switches over from being fossil fuel fired to clean electric fired. Those are all things that each of us can do. We can take actions in our own lives, but what really matters at the end of the day is how we shift things at the scale of our schools, our universities, our cities, and then the whole state. And that's how we can make huge impact on climate change through our own direct actions. And with that, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Boyd. Thank you all four presenters for excellent presentations. We're really at the end of our time. We got a question, a very student-oriented question. What are the internship opportunities at each of the speakers' institutions? So I'm wondering if you could just each take a moment and, do you have any immediate opportunities for students to be involved? Or other thoughts for internships that would help students move into this work? Want to go in order of the presentations and start with Alejandro Martinez?
Yes, Liz. So right now we have one GA who is working for us, and we're in the process to have 2 more student workers with us. So those are some of the opportunities like we have. We're not offering that as an internship. It's more student worker job or as a GA. So that's what we are doing.
Lacy McManus, do you all have internships?
Typically, we have a very robust summer internship program that is on hold for the moment in light of the current work from home and social distancing restrictions. As soon as we get back in office, we should be kicking something off. So you can check our listings on our website, gnoinc.org, or on our WorkNOLA website, which it's a job board we operate for the greater New Orleans region, and see what might be coming online for this summer. It's just unfortunately too soon to tell, but we will have internship opportunities in the fall. Of that, I am certain. So check our website.
Mary Williams, do you have internship advice or interns in the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice?
Yes, we have had internship opportunities, and many of those opportunities are based on specific projects, grant funding projects that we have. And so as those grant funding opportunities become available, we do have the internship opportunities. We just actually finished up a project in 2019, this Gulf Equity Water Corps project, where we worked with some New Harmony High School students and students with Dillard University. So as the funding becomes available, we will have additional internship opportunities.
And Z. Smith, we also got a couple questions saying, could you provide the name of the law that you mentioned, the law for tracking energy use, and the law that you cited. So could you talk about that as well as internship opportunities?
Sure. So at our own firm, we do have interns. We at all scales. We have a program for high school students who want to shadow, spend a day or two, find out what it is like to, what goes on in an architect's office. We also have interns who are in undergraduate programs in architecture, design, or construction. We also do a research fellowship, which people coming out of college or in the middle of college can come for 3 months or a year and advance our understanding through research. And you can see most of those through our company's website, which is the unspellable EskewDumezRipple.com. But I'm sure we can find that. We can. I'll type the firm's name on the website in the chat box. By the way, the act was Act 1184, and that act is the, I should have the name of it all spelled out, but I guess what I would say is that act is, I'll find the name of it here. I can zoom this up. It is House Bill 1640, but the final act was called Act 1184 by LeBlanc and Faucheux and Senator Campbell. And it was called, it was amending the Energy Management Act of the state of Louisiana. But I'll share that information out through those who registered for this through Liz Davey.
Okay, we need to bring our presentation to close our program tonight. Thank you to our presenters. A lot of really interesting information and inspiring work that's underway that I hope people will join in. Watch for your email for a link to the recordings. We hope that many of you will use these recordings in your classes to make climate a class, be part of, include more students in the Solve Climate Change by 2030 initiative. Thanks again to our panelists for their presentations tonight, and thanks to Shelley Moe of the Bywater Institute for her technical assistance. And thank you all for coming together tonight at this very difficult time. Good wishes to you all, and good night.